All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have welcome everyone to this fireside chat. It's gonna be a very interesting, educational, and of course, enlightening conversation that we're gonna be having with Isobel and Barbara. They are two amazing professionals in the content design and strategy field, and it's an honor to be able to learn from them and from their expertise, their knowledge, and of course that which they've picked up along the line to this point. So I will get started. So for what we want to accomplish today, guys, we want to look at um, making sure that we shine more light on content design and strategy as a career path within the tech industry. We know that one of the key things that we're trying to do today is to sort of highlight this area of tech. For several of us, probably have been asking questions around how do I, get into tech, or is there anything else that I can do to get into tech, essentially? And this is one of those ways. Also, in terms of what we would be looking at, we would also be looking at revealing what it's like day to day to be a content designer or content strategist. We also will be looking at helping you all on this call, to see how you can get into the field for those who are interested in doing so, and of course, what does the future hold for content design and strategy, essentially. And our guests are going to be doing a fantastic job of walking us or taking us through all of this or objectives, and making sure that we actually nail these things down today in the short time that we have. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and introduce our guests, and I will start with Barbara Okafor. Barbara, and I'll be reading from our bio here. A round of applause for them. Barbara is a seasoned media and content strategist, and with a master's degree in media and communications from London School of Economics. With over 7 years, working with global brands like TikTok, BBC, Media Action, Trace TV. She's also, she's specialized in creative content strategies, audio, audience engagement, and data-driven campaigns. She has achieved transformative results, including 150% boost in brand engagement. She currently leads digital strategy and marketing for the Isle of Wight Council here in the United Kingdom. Barbara excels at leading cross-functional teams, building creator communities, and staying ahead of entertainment trends. When she's not reshaping media landscapes, you can definitely find Barbara exploring culinary delights or setting personal bests in the gym. Oof, sounds like someone that really, really values getting fit. Also, I am gonna move on to Isobel, but you guys should give Barbara a round of applause. It's not easy to be able to do all of that. And also, in one's career, it's amazing. And Isobel is someone that I have been, very, very lucky to have, worked with over the last, say, 18 months or so. We worked together in the same company, and I remember the first day that I went into the office, probably the first week I resumed. She's been there, and I remember our very first conversation. Right from that first conversation, I knew I was in the right hands. I was in the right place. I was going to be working with the best, essentially. And I've been blessed to actually work with her. Isobel Ashmore, which is her surname, is an exceptional content design lead at NatWest Box, where she plays a vital role in creating user-centric content which resonates with users. With over a decade of experience leading companies such as Vitality and NS&I, Isobel leverage expertise to enhance customer experiences within the financial service sector. Before her role in content design, Isobel worked with customer and media communications as well as marketing, where she spent over 4 years focusing on effective communication and brand strategy. Isobel holds a Colonial University of London. And welcome, Isobel. Yes, yes, yes. So I am gonna I'm gonna, get back to you, the two of you, very, very soon, and we will be, going into the depth of our conversations. Um, However, before I do so, I would like to let us know that for those of us who are on this call, if you have questions that you would like to ask, please, what we will do is for you to jot them down, maybe in your notepad or somewhere on your computer. Hold them carefully, because I'm sure you would have questions, right? Hold them to the end of the session with Isobel and Barbara, and then we would open the floor at the end of it, for your questions. At that point, you can either raise up your hands and ask the question, or you can drop it in the chat. But for now, let us concentrate on the conversations that we're about to have. Bye bye, baby. And then we would have an amazing time. All right, so let's get started, guys. Isobel and Barbara, welcome. Yeah, it's such an amazing feeling to have you two here, and I know that we are going to have fun. One of the key things that I would want us to jump into right off the bat is, what sparked your interest in content design? And I will start. I'll start with Isobel. How did you find your way into this field? I know that we've read your bio. We've talked about, your journey. So someone on this call may have a little bit of an idea now about, how your journey has been, but only you can tell it best. So what sparked your interest in content design, and how did you find your way into it?
Well, firstly, thank you for the glowing introduction to my career. It's nice to kind of hear someone else kind of talk about everything I've been up to over the last 10 years, and I'm really excited to be here and talk about content design. So I actually didn't realize I was doing content design until a few years after I started doing it. I think because there was no real clear path for content design as a career when I started, which is why I'm super excited now that content design is being recognized not only as a career, but people are talking about it, people are interested, and I'm seeing more and more people kind of join the ladder as junior content designers, much more than I saw even just a few years ago. So I started my career in internal communications, and then went into kind of marketing, into PR, and finally ended up in content design. So I've always designed communications for different audiences, whether that be kind of internal employees. I've worked with financial advisors, I've worked with developers, and something I've always kind of gone back to is being able to turn something really complicated into something simple. We see a lot of jargon in tech, finance, and something I've just always found really interesting is thinking, okay, I've got this complex piece of information about tax, for example. How do I help people understand what that means for them? So in the UK, the average reading age is 9 years old, and only 2 out of 5 adults in the UK are financially literate. So the focus, particularly in tech, has to be the language. How are we using language? How are we presenting language to make it accessible to everyone? Because tech is everywhere, right? We need people to understand what they're using, how they're using it. So yeah, a very long and complex way into content design, but I think kind of having that principle there from the start helped me realize if this is where I wanted my career to go.
I think I love what you said about being able to take something complex and helping people sort of like break it down. I think that is probably the backbone of anything called design, essentially. And yeah, that is a very, very good thing to hear you say. Barbara, I'm gonna get to you. I know that there is, and I think I was thinking through, looking at your career, looking at your, LinkedIn profile, and I know that if there's anything that keep coming apart from media, there's something that keep coming more frequently across all of your roles, and that is, content, digital content strategy. And I think content strategies, keep coming up. Tell us about how you got into this, right? You're from like Trace and or to BBC, and then into tech to TikTok, and then all the way to to I Love White Council. How did you get into content strategy? From your journey, that would be interesting to know.
Okay, thanks. Well, a very nice introduction, by the way. So basically, my journey started as a storyteller. I've always loved to tell stories, and I just wanted to connect to people beyond just words and pictures. I wanted to see why people resonated with a particular content, or why they felt passionate about certain things. And at the end of the day, when you ask people why they connect to certain things, because maybe they saw something or they read something somewhere and someone said something in a certain way that made them feel connected to that piece of work. So because of the passion I had, I studied journalism in school, mass communication. So the ideal thing for me would be to go and join, a newspaper or a TV house, start creating stuff like that. So because of my background in storytelling, I became a producer. So I started producing documentaries, making content, then at Trace, which was an entertainment-facing organization, despite the fact it also had like some tech aspects with it, because they wanted to create an app called Trace Play, where people can digitally, get music and the trending songs of the year. And I was opportune to work on that product at the time at Trace. And the task was to create, content that would resonate with people, that they would automatically want to get music on their phone rather than watching Trace on TV. And I came up with a strategy that would align with people who naturally would pick up their phones and, watch content on their phone, to make them want to click on that to watch music instead of their TV stations. And it made me realize that in as much as you can connect to people through content, connect to people through storytelling, you had to get a strategy that would align to certain people, because people are different. So that's what got me into strategy of the content creation itself. I realized that just telling stories and just being passionate about that hollow without like having a strategy behind it was not going to give results or bring results to the table. So I took that mindset and I went on to BBC, and I kept telling stories, because at BBC I was a digital producer. And as a digital producer, you were also going to be talking to people digitally, people who had to use their devices, people who had low attention span, who had so much content being thrown at them on social media. And it also fell back to understanding your audience and knowing what they want, what they like, and what will keep them engaged. So that also took me back to the drawing board to say, how do we tell stories and not just connect to people that doesn't just give information, but will resonate with them to the point where they will always want to come back for more, or they will always want to be engaged in that medium. So I did that at BBC for a while. Also very getting exposed to like data analytics, because BBC was a very digital first organization back in Nigeria or in Africa as a whole, because there's no like BBC TV in Africa. It's basically like BBC online. So I did that at BBC, and I got the opportunity to work at TikTok. And at TikTok, it was very different, because I'm used to, tailoring these stories and creating this content for people and understanding the audience. But at TikTok, the role was quite different, because TikTok is a creator-led app, which meant that the creators were the ones creating the content themselves. So it took me back to the drawing board, and I had to better understand, how do you create content strategies for people who were creating content to help grow like user engagement and retention for a digital-based app where people originate and create content for. So that got me into my technical part of my storytelling and understanding of data analytics, and just how to better understand the creators themselves, better understand the business goals, and how to align that together to weave a beautiful story that gets people coming back to the app, or also transform people into being creators themselves. So that's how I started my journey. Basically, it was just from one learning to the next for every role I've been on, and just the need to communicate to people in such a way that they are emotionally invested and they're engaged enough to want to come back for more. Yeah.
Thank you, thank you, thank you for that. I think if there's anything that I actually pick from that is storytelling, the power of storytelling, and that is very, very key to content design and strategy as well. And Isobel, you led as part of the amazing work you've done so far at NatWest Boxed, you led the content design for the Metal Hub. For those of you who may not know, the Metal Hub is one of the biggest business banking hubs in the United Kingdom to date. How would you, Isobel, describe what content design is, and also how does that differentiate from things like UX writing or technical writing, from your own perspective?
Something I've found about content design and UX writing is that they're used interchangeably, particularly if in kind of job titles. I know at NatWest and the group as a whole use UX writing and content design as kind of the same thing, and I don't see a massive difference in how those two roles work. I've been hired as a UX writer, I've been hired as a content designer, and my role hasn't really changed very much. Technical writing is different in that you're writing for a very different audience. So you are writing kind of API references, you're writing how products work so that developers can then build something. I do think the principles of content design are still in technical writing. I work with some really great technical writers at NatWest Boxed, and we work together to come up with principles of how we write, because if they are writing for their audience, that then trickles down into what the end customer is seeing and what kind of I need to present on screen. So there needs to be consistency between the two, and kind of the way we write is the same. The biggest difference I found is between copywriting and content design. So having worked in fields like PR and marketing kind of as a copywriter, I often would find I would work from a brief. So the problem has already been solved really by other people, and you're there to present that solution in the simplest way or the most engaging way, depending on what the goal is for that piece of work. What I do in content design is slightly different. So I don't work from a brief that someone else creates. I kind of create my own brief based on the problem that we're trying to solve as a collective. And yeah, I look at kind of empathy. So what is the end user, or how is the end user feeling about the certain problem that they may be having? What is the business feeling about the problem that they're having? And how can empathy come into the content that we use? And then from there, I spend a lot of time drafting things that no one will ever see in playgrounds. And yeah, never show anyone the first draft of your work because it's always terrible. But yeah, that's the biggest difference I find is the brief aspect really. We're all writing, we're all, as Barbara said, we're all telling that story. It's just we're all coming at it from a slightly different angle with different writing roles.
Thank you. I'm a product designer, for those of you who may or may not know, and our work, in mine and that of Isobel, sort of, we always have a place where it's always mixed. But there's one thing Isobel said, and I think I'm gonna borrow from her word. She allows me, or she does, is that for some of the key differences between product design and content design is that product design major in visuals and minor in content, and on the flip side, content design major in content and minor in visuals, essentially. And that always resonates with me. It's just, to me, one of the best ways to actually tell the difference between it. Just adding that to what she said. Now back to Barbara. Barbara, I know that one of the key things that we've started talking about earlier was, how you go into content strategy, some of the amazing work that you've done from Trace to, to BBC and all. What would you say is content strategy for someone on this call who is like, how do I get into this digital content strategy? What is it about? How can I get into it? But what is it about really? Could you enlighten us on what that is about really?
Okay, so content strategy is basically, in a nutshell, understanding your audience, the end user, their pain points, what you want to communicate to them, and on the other end, understanding your goals, or the goals of the business you're crafting the message from, and being able to pass on that message to that end user in such a way that it addresses their problem, at the same time delivers the message you want to deliver. So that is what content strategy is in a nutshell. And all of us on this call, somehow we've been content strategists if you're on social media by any means or form. If you decide to post certain things on Fridays because you know that everyone is resting in their homes and you want people to like your pictures more on Friday, and you decide to post on Friday, that's a strategy that you've come up with because you know that your user, or the people who are going to interact with your content, are home on Friday, and you know that you want more likes on your photos, so you decide that instead of posting that on Tuesday, I'm just going to post it on Friday. So that's a very simple example. But when it comes to transitioning that into a career and like a business, it also still falls back on understanding your audience. I'm very, very big on understanding your audience. And when I say that, I don't just mean that from a data point of view. It's also from an introspective point of view, where you have to look in and ask yourself before you put out anything, does this connect to me? On a normal day, would I read this thing, or would I watch that video? Would I click that button because they've said I should click a button? And understanding yourself as an audience and understanding other people that you talk to, your friends, your family, people on your social media page, how they interact with content, makes you a very good content strategist. But transitioning that into your place of work also has to do with you building some certain skills that would help you understand that a bit better. And when I say certain skills, I mean storytelling skills, for example, understanding, content creation itself, understanding the tools that you would use to create content like that, understanding, video production. I'm not saying you should specialize in all of them. I'm saying you have to have an understanding of what that entails, and you have to be an expert communicator, in the sense that when you understand how to create that content, you also understand who you're going to address, and you understand what the business wants to achieve with that message they're trying to address. Then coming in as the middleman to craft all that together and pass that message to the person. So that is what content strategy is in a nutshell. And for you to build that muscle, you have to also build the muscle of building and personal development, building your skills on those levels. And you could do that through very traditional sense, in the sense that when I joined all these companies, I joined as a storyteller. I didn't have hard skills per se. When I joined the job, I knew what I had to develop. I knew I had to be a better editor. So I went back on YouTube and started watching videos on editing. I knew I had to understand filmmaking, so I had to take a short course in filmmaking. I knew I had to understand product design, because when I started working at TikTok, or when I worked at Trace Play on the app, I had to understand what these people were saying. Oh, we have to reach audiences and make them excited for this app. I had to understand how the app worked. So it's just making sure that you're ever learning and developing those core skills that will make you an excellent communicator to the other party, which is your audience. So basically, in a nutshell, that is content strategy, and like what you need to do to like get into that field. Build your communicator skill, number one. Keep learning and understand your audience.
Yeah, thank you. And I think there's anything that seemed to sort of overlap here is understanding your audience, or understanding your users, and of course, learning. So thank you so much for that, Barbara. I think there is one more question that I would like to ask when it comes to us sort of understanding what you do, what content design is, what content strategy is. And by the way, if you guys on the call would have noticed that there is a lot of similarities. They are not exactly the same thing, but they are actually the same at the same time. And we would see more of this as as we go into the depth of what content design strategy is. One last question that I want to ask in this portion of things on this section is, why is content design becoming increasingly important in the tech industry, and how does this sort of impact the success of companies? And I would ask Barbara to go first this time, and then Isobel, you can take that, so that we take it. All right, over to you, Barbara.
It's becoming very important, because even if we look at the rise of AI and how artificial intelligence is on the rise, you realize that at the end of the day, you need a human behind that, being able to craft it in such a way that it connects to people emotionally. Not saying that ChatGPT, if you prompt it well, cannot create an amazing brief, but just saying that for you to get that brief to be amazing with ChatGPT, you have to ensure that you educate it in such a way that it understands the audience you're trying to communicate that to. And the reason why it's also very important for companies is because we are now in that stage in the digital world where just being a corporation that has revenue, that has a great product, is not enough. You have to sell that product to people. You have to make them excited for that product. And you have to go beyond that and be a household name, build a community, and increase the loyalty of people to that brand for you to be successful. For example, brands like Nike, when you think about Nike, you think motivation. You think about the footwear, and you think about all the amazing things they do. But like when you think about motivational ads, you think Nike. There are a lot of brands like that have been able to crack that space in such a way that their content resonates with the audience beyond the product. This is because we are living in a digital age where people relate to things that they are more drawn to things that they can relate to. So for companies to excel in this space, and why this is such a beautiful career path to venture into, is because they need people who are able to ensure that people are emotionally invested in their products. And how can you do that? It's through telling them stories. It's through crafting beautiful content designs or things that they can resonate with, they can relate to on their day-to-day. So it is always going to be a useful skill, and it is always something companies will need to rely on to build their communication around. So that is why it's not going to go extinct in any near future. And that's why this is really important for companies, to have content designers and content strategists who understand that need to connect to people and the need to tell stories to help build brand loyalty and help build user growth.
Thank you. Isobel, why is content design increasingly becoming important? And how does this impact company success?
I think it's always been incredibly important, and something I've mentioned before is that I don't think content design was ever really a thing previously. I've kind of mentioned jargon and complex language, and the whole history of the world has been full of jargon and people trying to turn that into something that people can actually understand. I think that if advancements in education and more people becoming educated to a higher level has also kind of really exposed the differences that people have when being able to consume information. When you think of all of the different kind of needs that people may have to be able to consume information, it's becoming a lot more obvious now. So people who are dyslexic or have trouble understanding numbers still deserve the right to access their banking app, for example, and understand how to run a small business. And they shouldn't just be gatekept for the people who can understand that complex information. I I would say content is kind of one small cog in the wheel of a company full of engineers and product experts and UX designers, but to get something out of the door that will work, none of those can work without the other, and that goes for content. It's a vital part of that wheel. Content determines the success of a product. If it's bad, users will know about it, and they will also let you know about it, usually quite loudly with bad reviews, whether that is in a public forum or direct customer feedback that you receive. You might have a decline in customers or no customers at all, and I find it quite difficult to determine the success of content design because of the fact that content doesn't really exist without visuals. So it's hard to kind of hone in on the words, but something that I tend to do is I take pride in the core data. So users being able to complete journeys without dropping off or going somewhere else, but I also focus on improving the experiences for everyone else who can't do that. So looking at the user feedback that we receive, and making sure that users can go through the journey seamlessly. I think there's always ways to improve things. And content is one of the ways that can be done. It's definitely not the only way. There's lots of other things that can be done in the engineering space, in visual design, but content is super important when it comes to making sure everyone has access to what they need to be able to live the life they want.
Yep. Content is super important. To make sure that people can live the life they want. Just imagine a product without the right words that people don't understand. It's just going to be a total nightmare. But now imagine that same product without words completely. That means that it's just plain unusable. And not to talk of like words that are not properly planned out, without the strategy of how best to communications that resonate with people in a specific geographical setting or in a specific industry, and so on and so forth. There's so many nuances to this, and so that is why this is super important. Very quickly, Isobel and Barbara, you would need to, and I think this time I'm starting with Isobel, you need to please tell us what your day-to-day looks like. Like, just give us an overview of what your day-to-day looks like as a content designer, Isobel.
I think everyone says this about their job, but no day is the same. So I work across multiple teams who are working on such a wide variety of projects, kind of all contributing towards the same goal, but in very different ways. So I will go from working in the Metal app and looking at how we write definitions for tax. And then I'll go and work with yourself, Imole, and how we can simplify things for internal operations users and kind of making sure that they see consistent language. My job basically is to make sure that at all times, no matter what their audience is, kind of where they're seeing the information, is to make sure that the content is useful, usable, and consistent. And what I mean by that essentially is users able to complete their intended task without unnecessary effort. I don't tend to do much writing anymore. My job kind of is looking for patterns. There's a lot of science and logic behind the language that we choose when we're kind of designing things at NatWest. I very rarely come up with content just off the top of my head and think, oh yeah, that will be fine in this space. There's a lot of that logic and the patterns that go behind it, and that's why I take a lot of pride and time in perfecting design systems for content, so that yourself as product designer, Imole, or product experts, or even people in kind of risk and legal fields can understand exactly why we've reached a decision on how we're talking about something. And it's to make sure that we kind of make sure that content is meeting our goal, internal goals of being meeting kind of reading ages and various accessibility rules that I really am passionate about more than anything else in the content field. So yeah, you will always see me squirreling away, looking at different buttons and error messages, especially, and spot the patterns, document them, so the next time we create something, the content's already there.
Yeah, thank you. Barbara, very quickly, over to you. What does your day look like? An overview of it.
Yeah, similar to what Isobel said, it very varies really on the day. And since my content strategy or my content design from my point of view is very external facing rather than like the app itself, it's more like selling, that app to other users and potential, user growth basically and user retention. So it's mostly project focused or campaign focused. So depending on what the business goal is for that month, for example, it could be transitioning, with TikTok, it would have been for a day to be like a dance app, transitioning people's perception of the app as a dance app to an entertainment first app. So let's say I have a project I'm working on, my day-to-day would be looking at how people perceive that app. So looking at the data behind it, what's trending on the app, what people are talking about, then how we could weave the communication and how we could get creators to create content around things that we want internally to be the message focused on the app or what we want to be proliferated on the app. So that would involve looking at the data, crafting messaging around the key topic that we want to communicate to users, and also working with like the UG team. So UG team is a team in charge of advertising on Play Store, stuff like that. So working with the UG team to say we want this ad to be placed in Play Store, etc. Working with the comms team to say we want external publicity. So if we want that to happen on Twitter, because we don't work in silos, in as much as these apps are apps on their own, they promote across other apps as well and other like technical spaces. So if we want that sort of promotion to happen, which happens very often, we have conversations with the UG team to say we want this out there. We have conversation with the comms team to say we want this to go out. We also look out for partnerships. So if we want the content to be more external facing with partners who would help increase credibility of that project, it is my duty to look at the potential partners. Let's say we have a movie project and we want people to focus on movie for the month of Black History Month. We'll look at potential partners that we can work with, whether it's Netflix or Showmax and things like that, and just have meetings around the kind of content we want focused on for the month. And the granular bits and the not so fun part is actually, drafting everything, educating creators, because you also have to do workshops for these people who are creating the content. So you have to do workshops, and we had a team of people who would organize like trainings for creators and also PGC partners, so like Netflix and the rest of them. We would organize workshops saying this is the kind of content we want, this is the play mood, this is what we want you to talk about. You can also, craft it the way you want eventually, but we lead that conversation when it comes to how we want this content to resonate with people. Then that would also involve speaking to the design team to create like banners, create like graphics, which kind of video content we want. Do we want it to just be image driven or do we want it to be video driven? And after that, we promote on the app or we promote on social media as well and just do the whole 360. Then a very important part of my role is taking feedback, not just from the data, but also from the team itself and how this resonated with, the cross-functional collaboration that we did together, how we can get that data and also inform the product team to say, this was very easy for people to spot, the algorithm recommended this really well, etc. So it's a very tiered and layered job. that has to do with just working with a lot of cross-function team, working with a lot of external partners, and understanding like, the comms bit and the marketing bit. For my current role at the Isle of Wight Council, it's kind of like slowed down in a way where, since I have a team that I work with, generally, like my day-to-day is more of being up to date when it comes to trends and being able to communicate that trend to the team to say, this is a great campaign that we could jump on to help a particular business goal. And the whole 360 happens again, where you craft the content design, you communicate that to the team, you work with the design lead, you create graphics or videos, you edit those videos, you put them on social media, you get feedback, and it goes again the same way. So basically, that's the nutshell. So it's not a day in my life, it's more like a month in my life when it comes to work.
Yeah, thank you so much. For Isobel, I think that's one of the key things that I picked from what she said about like our day to day is that spotting patterns and building systems, building, a structure, essentially that others can then work off, from. Also, Barbara, you talked about, that cross-functional sort of work where you would have to align with different stakeholders, a whole lot of work to be done for, that entire 360, media, digital content strategy. That is a lot. If there's anything that is very common there, we will get there, and I don't want to talk about it yet. But in like 1 minute each, guys, because of our time, what would be, and we are getting to the point where we are talking about actually breaking into content design strategy. What is the most valuable skill? And Isobel, this is a question for you. What is the most valuable skill or qualities for someone looking to break into content design? Isobel.
Having empathy for the kind of end user is definitely the most important thing I've learned. I have had to learn in my career, and I think anyone who is interested in content design will have to kind of learn this as well, is that you are never going to be an expert in every single thing you are creating content for. I am not an expert in small business owners. I'm not an expert in tax. I am not an expert in loans, and yet I have produced content for all of those things to great success. Like, we have hundreds of thousands of users of the Metal app, and it's growing every day, and I see that as a massive success. The empathy is the thing you will always come back to. You can learn to write, and often companies will have a specific way of writing anyway, which you'll need to learn and adapt to. But it's making sure that you have that passion for the end user and being able to help them that is the most important skill.
Yeah, empathy. That's a very, very good, very, very good one. Barbara, in 1 minute, what is the most valuable skill or quality? And you can, if there are more than one, feel free to mention them, that someone actually needs to break into content strategy from your own perspective.
I would agree with Isobel and say empathy is very important and understanding your audience, but she's covered that really well. And I would just say it's important to be an excellent communicator. And you don't become an excellent communicator through just maybe getting a degree in that. It also just takes constant practice of understanding how to best break things down for people, understanding why you should take a certain tone in a certain, case, and why you shouldn't take that tone in a certain situation. So when you become an expert communicator, being a content designer, internally, externally, writing copy, etc., will be quite easy for you. And it's a muscle you will build over time. So in as much as you might not feel like now you're an expert communicator, even myself, I learn every day on the job, which comes to the second point, adaptability. For you to be excellent at content design, you have to be adaptable to trends changing, adaptable to systems changing, the way people work, adaptable to being accessible. You know what Isobel has been saying about accessibility. It is something I have to be very aware of in my day-to-day, understanding that your audience vary. and understanding that you have to adapt your content to that varying audience. And you also have to adapt yourself and be a dynamic enough person to learn as the tides change. So I think those are the key things for me. So being an excellent communicator, being empathetic towards your end user, and being adaptable to changes.
Oh, thank you, Barbara. And I think most of the points that you two mentioned are actually, quite important. They are very, very important, actually. There is one key thing that I would probably connect back to what you said, Barbara, and I think also some points you mentioned, Isobel. Isobel specifically, you read political science at like your first degree, and here you are, crafting content design and strategy for some of the biggest banks in Europe. What would you say, especially for someone that is like trying to move from a different career path into content? What is that advice that you would give such a person who is trying to to nail down that first content design role from like a different field, either in or outside of tech, for example? Isobel.
Yeah, and you mentioned kind of my background. I studied politics at university, obviously very, very different to then going on to working content design in banking. Everyone, when I started in studying politics, would be like, oh, well, you're going to end up at the House of Commons, or you're going to work, you're going to become a politician. And I was like, no, thank you. I don't think I would enjoy that at all. What I kind of got from that degree, though, was, as Barbara mentioned, kind of learning how to communicate with different people and about different things, and just having a range of ideas kind of around you all of the time has really helped to kind of open my horizons and help me learn so much about different people. I think in terms of breaking into content design, is talk to people. My first content design role was an internal move. So as I mentioned, and Imole's mentioned in my introduction, I worked in PR and internal communications first. And I was able to move into content design because I was I was being proactive and involving myself in projects and asking the right questions. And I proved myself over time to kind of other content designers, or kind of what they were at the time. So by the time an opportunity came up, it felt like something I could naturally move into because I had taken that initiative to talk to those people and learn from them, knowing that it would help me later on down the line. I think now there are also junior positions available in content design, as I mentioned, and I think it's brilliant. It was not available to me, and I would recommend a junior position to anyone, and it's great for people looking to enter into content design and having the opportunity to learn from people who have been doing it like a much longer period of time. I've worked with junior content designers before, and the willingness to learn is something that is really important. Even if you come from a completely different job, whether it's research or data or product, anywhere else in tech, you will have the ability to be a content designer. It's the willingness to learn that is the thing that will get you that job and really impress people.
Yeah, willingness to learn. That's a key one there. Barbara, and I think if there's anything that you've mentioned, and I think Isobel has also mentioned, that is that ability to communicate, which is one of those things that is very common from the things both of you have mentioned. For someone who is on this call or is going to be watching this right after, and they feel like listening to Barbara and Isobel, the two of you are so eloquent, and it's obvious that you're very good communicators, but I'm not so sure I'm really that. But I'd like to give content design a shot. How can they build this level of expert communication not just in talking, but also in writing and in all the other aspects of communication, right? How can they get to that point? Very quickly, Barbara.
I'd like to think that I'm eloquent. Thank you. But I'm still learning as much as everybody else on the call. I've just been privileged to be opportune to work in certain places and just build that muscle. But what I would really say is that I didn't start my career from, it wasn't all rosy and dandy, study mass communication and you go straight into getting jobs in trades and the rest of them and working on content. I just knew I wanted something different from being in front of the camera, because everybody expects you to be a journalist and be a broadcaster when you study mass communication. And I knew I didn't want that for myself. And I started learning and I started watching YouTube videos. YouTube videos were my bread and butter. I was watching anything I could find that had to do with content. I was speaking to people who I loved their work. I would ping them on Instagram, ping them on Facebook, everywhere I could find them. I was messaging them and said, I want to learn this thing from you. I was very curious. That was what led me to the point where I'm able to even have this conversation in the first place. So I would say, start somewhere, speak to somebody, do something. Don't, it's not wishful thinking, it's doing that would get you to anywhere you want to get to, basically. And what I would really say is just watch anything that interests you and don't be scared to show yourself. If you're coming from a political science background, if you're coming from engineering, construction, bring that element of yourself into your content design and your content strategy. That is what is going to make you unique. Then learn the skills. If you notice all through this call, very quickly, I haven't spoken about, learn how to be a videographer, learn graphic design, etc. Those skills, you would realize that you need them and you will start picking up, the muscle and the expertise of learning how to do these things. But the basic is being curious enough to try, curious enough to learn, lead by doing rather than, wanting to do it. Just do anything. And also start putting your things out there, because I'm seeing a lot of Nigerians on this call. And I would say that for me, what was the deal breaker? What really put me out there was the fact that I wasn't scared to put myself out there. I was creating content. I didn't care where it was going to go and if it had a platform or not. I was putting it out there. So when it was time to get a job or to impress somebody or get an interview, I had something to show for it. I had to say, see, I had done this thing. It's on my personal page, but I did it anyway. So you should start somewhere, start building that muscle and start doing it on your own. So when the time and opportunity presents itself, you have something to show for it and they will be willing to take a chance.
Thank you, Barbara. We are going to start looking at the future of content design and strategy. I know that Barbara, you touched a little bit of on this, but we all know the elephant in the room, which is AI. I'm curious to know what you two actually think when it comes to the future of things. We all have been hearing things like, oh, AI is coming for all of us. We are all going to go back to our villages and start farming, because AI is going to take all of our jobs and things like that. But away from that slightly, how do you envision content design? I think Isobel, this is for you, and then Barbara, you would also give your opinion on this. But how do you envision content design evolving over the next few years? And what should newcomers, people that want to cross over into content design, or those who are just starting in content design, what should they be looking at to prepare for in the changing landscape? Over to you, Isobel.
So my career started when I was already a daily user of an iPhone. I was well embedded into internet culture. I had every social media platform you could possibly imagine, some of which are now not even in existence anymore. I would say, so I've grown up with technology around me. So I haven't really had to adapt to that, but something I've really had to adapt to is AI. And it's the first kind of technology that is brand new to me and I'm having to learn from scratch. I still have a long way to go about learning about the impact that AI will have on the world and also for my career. There's a lot of fear around AI, particularly in content roles and in design roles, because ChatGPT turns everyone into an expert in everything, it seems. And yeah, it can be scary, but I think that I've played around with kind of different AI tools for content design, and I think Barbara's touched on this previously, is that nothing can ever replace your innate human ability to tell stories and empathize with other people. I wouldn't be sat here talking to a load of robots. I'm talking to humans who are interested, and that's what gives me passion. And I think that is the human element that can't be taken away from us. My biggest piece of advice would be to learn how to write really good AI prompts that will make you efficient with your time, regardless of kind of what field you want to go into and what specialism you're interested in, whether that is content design, content strategy, writing. The technology is only as good as the information that we feed it, right? So asking the right questions in AI tools and making sure that any AI tools that help you with your job, you need to give it the right questions. And that's what's really going to impress leaders in interviews. And that would particularly impress me if someone in an interview said, oh, I've learned how to kind of ask AI these questions so that we can get the right reading age for things. I know I talk about reading age a lot, but it's something I'm incredibly passionate about. But also stay true to your principles. So everyone should be able to use banking services, and I believe that wholeheartedly. And to be able to do that, they need to kind of understand what they're signing up for, how to make the most of it. And I use content design principles and that human connection to fight for this every day. So yeah, passion.
Thank you. Passion. And nothing can take away the place of empathy, and also just, really that human connection. Nothing can take that away. Barbara, very quickly over to you as well. How do you envision, content design strategy, especially on your side, on this strategy? How do you envision that, evolving in the next few years? Also, what should someone who is looking to get into it or are just getting started in it, what should they be looking out for or preparing for in this changing landscape? Over to you, Barbara.
Thank you. I see AI as your executive assistant. I think what is going to happen over time is that it's going to be a friendly companion that you should know how to use. As I said earlier, things will change. You should be adaptable to those changes. And being adaptable to those changes is learning the softwares that will change the industry over the coming years. And as Isobel said, it's not gonna eradicate us from the ecosystem of telling those stories. I cannot imagine going for a video interview, because my roles have always intersected with having to create visuals, like actual videos. I cannot imagine interviewing someone and it's AI or a robot, speaking to the person. They won't connect the same way they would connect to me with a voice that would laugh with them when they say something funny, and things like that. But I would happily prompt ChatGPT to help me get the questions I'm going to ask them very quickly, instead of spending the whole day or 3 hours crafting those questions myself. So when you know how to use these tools to benefit your business or to benefit your role, you will always be a step ahead from people who want to shy away from that technology. So that is what I see happening. What I see happening is people who have adapted to that trend understand how to use it to make sure that they give the best product and the best result possible in their roles. Currently, I do not have a problem with using ChatGPT. I do not have a problem with teammates using ChatGPT or any AI tool. The only thing I would say is ensure that it is your critical thinking, your prompts, and ensure that you're refining it to the point where when it gets to the end user, it feels like it's a human talking to them and not a bot. And yeah, I just think that if you're transitioning into this career path, in as much as you should learn everything that we've said, also be aware of the strengths and learn them. Learn how to prompt. There are a lot of courses. I recently took one, I think it was on HubSpot, about writing the best prompts. I thought I was a guru at writing prompts, so I took that course and I was like, wow, so I can do this. And the point is, just being adaptable and constantly learning is going to help. And the industry would definitely change. The world is moving towards artificial intelligence. There's so much funding in that space. So be ahead of the curve and make sure you are also moving with the world and ensuring that you always show that I'm an expert at what I do, but I'm adaptable to making sure that my experience and the experience of a great, computer would combine and give the best results for your company or for your business.
Thank you, and I think the key things here, guys, is that we are not going back to the village to farm. Instead of being afraid of technology and AI specifically, we should embrace it. We should learn to use it to our advantage, and not just that. We would allow it to have a field day. We would also make sure that we are checking all of the outputs. We are making sure that it still sounds human. It is still for humans, and it's not for robots, essentially. So yeah, at this point, we are about 5 minutes over, our time. But I will still, if you all would allow me, open the floor for questions at this point. If anyone has questions, you can either drop it in the chat or you can just raise your hands. You can just see the hand icon there. Click on it, it's going to say hello, and then feel free to ask Isobel or Barbara questions at this point. So I'm just going to shut up and wait for someone to do so. You guys, I'm sure you have questions, so because you won't come to this event if you don't have questions, essentially. All right, so fire away. Okay, Flash has said he's got questions. Any other person got questions? Okay. All right, Flash, ask away. Over to you.
You hear me?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. It's been a wonderful, so much to come back to from the tech. Quick one. My question is for Barbara. At least from my name, you can tell I work for a university. So how do you make content officially and still try to resonate with the youth? If you understand, they asked me to say A is a boy. I have to say A is a boy. But in the process of saying A is a boy, I'm dealing with millennials. I'm dealing with Gen Z buddies. I have to make sure I drop something they can see, resonate, and come back and vibe with, and not just read it and just walk away. It could be depressing sometimes. So tell me, or give me some tricks, or probably a course, or I know it can be. I know ChatGPT can do that for me. It's not so human, actually, so it can't do that part. But just, I don't know, an insight. Probably you've handled something when you were at TikTok or the likes. Thank you very much. I'll be listening.
Hi, Bash. Okay, so one key experience from my career that I've left out on this call that I shouldn't have is my experience at LSE. So while I had my master's at LSE, I was working at LSE as well as a podcast and video producer. And in that role, my responsibility was to take research that had a lot of, jargons, and it's the London School of Economics. So you can imagine the complex level of research they would do and transform that research into documentary pieces or short form video pieces, or even like articles that would resonate with the audience. And one of the core tricks for me was understanding, as I said, the audience who you're trying to speak to. So we have different platforms. We have Instagram, which is very visual. We have YouTube, where people sit back and they can watch 5-minute videos and they'll still remain engaged. And we have TikTok and the likes, where you have to break certain things down in very fun, trendy ways. I think what I would advise you to do is educate yourself on those lingos, even if it doesn't come natural to you to use them in your normal languages. Educate yourself in the lingos on the platforms that you're trying to share this content on. Educate yourself on what your audience is. One key thing that helped me at my LSU role was that I built something called an audience persona. So your audience persona basically is the characters you're addressing. So it could be me, Barbara, how old I am, the kind of things I love. On a normal day, I'm a working class. By 5 o'clock, I'm back home, or I'm at the gym, I'm in front of my TV. Build a person and build those characters across for your key audiences. So when you're writing your strategy, or when you're writing what to resonate to the person, when you look at what you've written, you look at the character that you've built and you wonder, would this person relate if I say, oh, Gen Z baddie, and you're trying to address a millennial in that situation? Or will the Gen Z body relate to something that would maybe relate better to a baby boomer or someone who was born in that generation? So when you have those personas, when you can see them visually and not just think them up, you can always check your work and always look at it and say, would this person resonate with this? Would this person, and also peer reviews are very important. You don't work in silos. Ask people around you, ask your audience on social media, if I use this term, would you be engaged with it? And people like engagement in as much as it comes from a corporate page. So at the LSC, we did something called the Feedback Friday. So every Friday, we'd have the documentaries up and we'll ask people, did you enjoy this? What did you enjoy watching it the most? Did you enjoy this particular scene? Especially if that scene, we crafted it in such a way that we wanted to address a certain audience. And people gave us feedback and we refined the content based on that feedback. So don't be shy to ask your audience directly what they want, and also build those personas so you always have something to look against when you're creating your content. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Barbara. I think we have a question in the chat. However, looking at this question, I think it's probably best this should be for Isobel, because it says content designing and it was the first step there. I think it's probably an Isobel question. So, Isobel, if you are happy to take this.
Sure. Yeah. So I guess the first step is just make sure that you have an interest in writing and communicating with people. Once that's ticked, it's practice. So I use a tool called Hemingway Editor, and I'll drop a link to it in the chat shortly, but I basically use that to make sure that I'm writing something in the simplest way, and I will also use that as practice, not just when I'm having to do something for work. So just take a piece of writing that you have done. It doesn't have to be very long. You can pick a random piece of jargon if you wanted to, and try and explain it in a really simple way. Put what you're writing into this tool and it will give you a grade. And what that grade does basically is the lower that grade is, the better or the more simple your writing is to understand. And just practicing that skill over and over again is something that I find really helpful. I definitely don't get things perfect first time. I don't think anyone does. And I've said this before, that your first draft of something it's for your eyes only. It can be as messy and as bad as you want it to be, as long as you have something on the page to work with is really important. And most important, it's something that you have worked with first. It's not something someone else has written. You don't want to become a proofreader rather than a content designer. They're very different. Kind of working on your own craft is really important there. And yeah, look for patterns and things. Like when you're using an app, look for patterns where you're having to fill out a form. What do the different error messages look like when you get something wrong? What is the form actually asking you? And think about what is there any kind of logic that has gone into it, and do some research that way. I find that really interesting when if I make a payment to someone with my banking app. I love kind of getting things wrong on purpose and seeing exactly what that experience is like, because you'll learn a lot about content design from the things that don't go well. That would be my first step. And yeah, just read as much as you can and consume the information that is available on YouTube. And there's hundreds of courses out there on content design, and yeah, there's so much out there now. It's great, and I'm kind of jealous I never got to use it when I was first starting my career.
Thank you, Isobel. Yeah, if you have any more questions, Isobel and Barbara have we had a conversation before, and they're gracious about this. They are happy for you to connect with them on LinkedIn. Their names are on the banners and flyers for the event, so feel free to connect with them on LinkedIn, and you can also ask them questions on LinkedIn. They are happy to provide answers to that. Also, some of you may just have like questions that you're getting started. You want, someone to just, double check, someone to just, bounce ideas off, or something that you're struggling with. If they have some time, I'm sure they will be able to help you, define those things, and help you make them a lot easier to do. So thank you so much, guys, for your time today. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Isobel, for your precious time that you shared with us, the wealth of knowledge that you've shared with us. I wish we had a longer time, but in this short time, we've been able to do quite a lot as well. So this whole session is recorded and is going to be available on our YouTube channel. Just look for Tech Even Africa. You're going to see them there. Would also send that to you guys. So feel free to go or rewatch it or share it with friends and family as well. Thank you once again for all your time, and of course, specifically our speakers, Isobel, Ashmore, and Barbra Okafor. Thank you so much, and let's all have a lovely Sunday evening. And yeah, thank you guys. Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye.